Hello everyone, this is another update on my Proboat Zelios Miss Geico 36-inch. A lot of stuff has happened since the last video, both good and bad. I'm going to go over all of that. First thing you'll notice here is I added another secondary water intake. This is from Offshore Electronics. It's the dual intake rudder. If you look, there's two intakes and it leads to two hoses, and this cools the motors. Show the inside layer. Second thing that happened to it is it had a massive flip and a crack. I drove it when I probably shouldn't have. It hit some wind and flipped. Almost, it started filling with water, but luckily I got it. Cracked in a few places here, here, and here. And I've actually fixed all of them. Though it doesn't look like it because they're still black, but it's completely smooth to the touch. I'll go over how I fixed that. So now I'll open it up. So first thing you'll notice is there's carbon fiber everywhere. So what I did was I actually took apart everything and did an entire carbon fiber inlay of the boat all the way down the back, almost all the way up the front too. If you look, it does end, there's some light down there, but I'll show you where I did go all the way to the front. Yeah, and so there's some more hoses because of the secondary water intake. And yeah, so to do the carbon inlay, first thing I had to do is remove everything. It's kind of easier said than done because some of these screws are kind of difficult to remove, but I eventually got them all out. Next thing I did was I sanded down the fiberglass, and that was to make the epoxy adhere better. I then took strips of carbon fiber, or I then took paper and sized it correctly to fit in the boat. This was the hardest part, and it took a long time. And I used those as templates to cut the carbon fiber. Now, to actually cut the carbon fiber, what I would recommend doing is just using a sharp pair of scissors and an X-Acto knife. If you try to use, I saw some tutorials that you put tape along the edges where you're cutting and then cut on the tape. What I found was when you try to remove the tape, it's very difficult and you end up fraying the carbon fiber even more. So I actually cut it, I just ended up cutting it straight with scissors or an X-Acto knife, and that cuts really well as long as it's sharp enough. If you're using the carbon fiber composite with Kevlar material, which is out there, you won't want to do that because I tried cutting that with sharp scissors and the X-Acto knife, and it's very difficult to cut. You'll want to get specific shears for doing that. That stuff is really hard to cut because the Kevlar strands are really, really thin and they go right between everything. So yeah. So then what I did once I had all the strips cut is I basically put down a layer of epoxy, then a layer of carbon fiber, then another layer of epoxy. I'm not gonna do a tutorial on this because it was my first time doing it. I'm a complete noob, and there's plenty of better tutorials out there on how to do this. But the only thing you really want to make sure of is you get all the way along this top edge, which is the seam where they glue the two halves of the boat together when it was made. And that's also where it cracked here and on the front. So along the edges, there's one long strip going all the way down, and then towards from here on, the rest of the entire inside's covered, including the bottom area and such. But the majority of it is along this top edge. So from here to here, only the top edge has carbon fiber because that's where it's most important. What you can also do is put some epoxy in the tips. I haven't done that because the crack here, you notice what I did was I stuck a piece of carbon fiber kind of like my hand is in the inside like that, and hopefully that'll hold. If it doesn't, I'll go back and pour some in the tips, but it should be fine. See, that's why it looks like it's black here, is because that's actually the carbon fiber. You're seeing the epoxy actually flowed into the crack and completely filled it, so it's very smooth. So another thing that I did is once you put the carbon fiber in, you'll probably want to, I used some silicone to fill in the holes while gluing the carbon fiber, because that way the epoxy wouldn't flow into the screw holes. And I was able to just drill through the carbon fiber and re-drill all the holes, which was really easy. I also drilled some more holes for extra water outlets and ports. All those I got from Offshore Electronics along with the rudder. Very high quality stuff, and the hoses. Last thing I'd like to say is to fix the cracks. I also filled them in with moldable epoxy, and that stuff, basically it's some marine grade one, and you just roll it into a ball and stick it on after mixing it together and then sand it. It's really easy to use. And that filled in like chips, like here there's a massive chip, and also down here and on the front nose. It's pretty simple to use. I may go and repaint the entire thing due to the fact that there's a lot of blotches and like visible seams and stuff now, but I haven't had any reason to. Oh, also I should mention, when you're gluing it, the epoxy in, you'll want to mask pretty much the entire boat if you don't want to get random spots of epoxy, like right here. It actually went through the tape somehow, but other than that, it turned out really well, I think, for my first time. It's not perfect. If you look, there's a lot of areas that are like kind of messed up, but you can't really see it, especially once all the stuff's back on. So I like it. The boat feels way more rigid than it was originally, and hopefully it'll hold up now. And I'll probably be able to upgrade the propellers and not worry about it completely splitting. So yeah, that's how I did a full carbon fiber inlay on my boat. And yeah, so thanks for watching. I'll probably post a running video of this shortly.